So we are here to talk about a new initiative of your California Department of Justice, which we have named Open Justice. I want to start by thanking Congresswoman Karen Bass. We all know she was formerly the Speaker of the California Assembly. She has represented Los Angeles and the state, and now is in our country's capital. She has long done work related to criminal justice policy, and we're very honored to have her stand with us today. I want to thank so profoundly Chief Charlie Beck. He is a law enforcement leader in the country. We have had the good fortune of being able to partner with him, the California Department of Justice and LAPD, on many innovative approaches to law enforcement, and he will be talking with us today. And then we also have Professor Justin McCrary from UC Berkeley. He is a professor of law, and he is one of the many academic leaders that we have been working with to roll out Open Justice. And so he'll talk a little bit about what this means from his perspective as a professional who studies systems and gathers statistics and analyzes data. I would like to, before I begin, in particular point out three individuals who are career employees of the California Department of Justice and the Criminal Justice Information Services Division that we call CJIS. Joe Dominic, where are you? Thank you. Adrian Farley, there you are. And Julie Basco. Because what we are about to talk about is, I believe, a whole new way of doing business as government, which is adopting technology in a way that we can improve and actually increase transparency. And when we have talked with a couple of people about this initiative, they have said, well, I'm sure you're going to have to throw millions of dollars into this new approach. Who are you hiring from the private sector to be your consultants to figure out how to get this job done? Let me tell you, I didn't have to hire anybody because we have the talent right here in the Department of Justice, career people who are so dedicated to innovation that they figured out how to make this work. So I applaud you guys, and hopefully you all will print their names. They deserve it. So let's talk about where we are in the country and in the state. Right now, there has been a lot of coverage about two tragic killings, one in Texas and another in Illinois, with two dedicated law enforcement officers who have been killed in the line of duty. In the line of duty, doing the work of sacrificing themselves in service of others and in service of safety of our communities. They are just two of the most recent on-duty deaths of police officers in this country. Let's also then think about where we are in terms of other loss of life we have seen. We have seen loss of life in Ferguson, loss of life in New York, in Texas, in South Carolina, and here in California. And all of these incidents have encouraged, have influenced a national dialogue about what is the condition of the relationship of trust between law enforcement and the communities we have served. And I believe that part of this conversation should take place looking at the data. What are the numbers? What are the facts that we know that we can actually quantify that can help influence public policy around how we can improve these numbers and improve the situation? And so today, we are launching Open Justice because, frankly, I know as a career prosecutor, having worked my entire life with sworn police officers and community members and witnesses to crime and victims of crime, I have known my entire career that we as a society, if we are going to engage in smart public policy, cannot buy into the false choice. The false choice that suggests you're on one side or the other, as though there are two sides opposed to each other. They're not opposed to each other. And it's a false choice to allow this conversation to be influenced by that perspective. And I think it is wrong and it's misdirected. So what is Open Justice? It's a first of its kind criminal justice open data initiative that embraces transparency to improve trust and accountability between law enforcement and the communities we serve, and most importantly, focused on the ultimate goal, which is improving public safety. It is also about recognizing that all of us, and this is the spirit behind this approach, all of us want to live in a community and work in a community where we can be safe. So, at the core of this initiative is data, and in particular, quantitative information that can help us be objective and test our hypotheses. The California Department of Justice collects large amounts of data, criminal justice data, and will now make that information open to the public. We are now sharing this information with the public to analyze. This initiative, Open Justice, has two parts in particular. One is what we call the Open Data Portal, and it will provide downloadable, raw databases to the public. The second part of Open Justice is what we call the Justice Dashboard, and it basically spotlights key performance metrics that are built from the Open Data Portal. And these metrics are basically things that we measure in the criminal justice system and information we keep in the California Department of Justice. And we will present it on the dashboard in a way that is clear and easy to use with interactive charts. So, as many of you know, I've long advocated that we should have a smart on-crime approach to criminal justice policy. And part of that theory of being smart on crime is let's adopt the public health model that tells us if we want to deal with an epidemic, be it a health epidemic or a crime epidemic, let's focus and put resources into prevention first. If we're dealing with it in the emergency room or the prison system, it's too late and it's too expensive and we will not be effective. Another component of what I believe it takes to be smart on crime is to apply metrics to our analysis of effectiveness. Instead of designing systems based on some blind adherence to tradition, let's apply metrics. Let's count what is happening and then apply the same standards that our friends in the private sector apply. What's the return on our investment? Do the numbers match up? How's it looking on paper? So that is part of what we are doing here today. And we know, by the way, that no single data set can provide a complete picture in terms of what is happening in the criminal justice system. So I like to think of what we are presenting today as Open Justice 1.0. Think of it as a startup. So we're bringing it out to show it to everyone, knowing that there will be room for improvement and growth. But this is what we've got right now, and we didn't want to hold on to it much longer. We wanted to share it with the public. So as the top cop of California, and Charlie Beck knows this, when we lead law enforcement organizations, it's certainly been his approach and mine. Let's first look in our own backyard and figure out whether there's room for improvement there. So with that point in mind, in January of this year, I directed the California Department of Justice's Division of Law Enforcement under Director Larry Wallace to do a 90-day review of what we are doing with our special agents in the Bureau and look at what we could do better. And coming out of that 90-day review, we realized that it was time for us to provide leadership around creating training around implied bias in law enforcement. So we reached out to one of the experts in this field who happens to be at Stanford University here in California. And we have been working with her for many, many months and have now developed, with the collaboration of POST, what we believe is the nation's first comprehensive training on implied bias for law enforcement. And in fact, we're going to be rolling that out with training here in Los Angeles on November 17th with law enforcement leaders and in Sacramento on November 19th. The process by which we arrived at that was we convened what we have called the 21st Century Policing Working Group. Law enforcement leaders like Charlie Beck, leaders from sheriff's departments, other police chiefs, deputy sheriffs, DAs, probation officers. We convened them at least a dozen times between January and now to come up with this agreement and these standards. It's something that I think also is evidence of California's leadership always in the country around what makes for smart and good criminal justice policy and smart and good policing. So we did that in January. We'll be rolling it out. In April of 2015, this year, we also at the California Department of Justice rolled out a body camera program. I've directed the special agents in the California Department of Justice that we will be using body cameras. And so we rolled that out in April, and that will be applied to all special agents who are doing work in the field. Smart on crime in the 21st century. Let's talk about that. I believe if we will be smart on crime in this century, we must have a very focused priority around adoption of technology by law enforcement and government. We must adopt technology. Good government means adopting technology. And by the way, the technology that is changing the world is being created right in our backyard. California should be doing this, and we are. To that end, we in the Department of Justice in 2011 created the E-Crime Unit, focused on crimes committed through the use of technology. That unit has been doing extraordinary work, then applying technology to the forensic work we need to do to investigate crime, and also having the skill set to identify when crimes are being used through technology and exploring how we can make sure that there will be accountability. Following up on that, we created the Privacy and Protection Unit of the California Department of Justice, again focused on the reality and the realization we embrace the technology. We also want to make sure that we defend the consumer's right to privacy and the public's right to privacy, and we will be vigilant in doing that as well. Following up on that work, adoption of technology by government, good government, in 2013, we created what we named the Smart Justice Initiative. And in particular, it integrates state and local databases and gives that information to police chiefs, sheriffs, and other law enforcement leaders so they can engage in predictive policing, so they can have the data in front of them around how crime is occurring in their jurisdiction in a way that will help them decide how they'll distribute their limited resources to the greatest good. Smart Justice in one of the technology-trained magazines has been named Google for Cops. And then the latest initiative, of course, is what we're doing with Open Justice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically these two components of Open Justice. One, the Open Data Portal. So I see today as being the first step in our Open Data Initiative and as a down payment on transparency. In particular, what Open Data Portal is, and I think everybody's going to need glasses or a microscope to read that, but you can have access to it online. It actually went online and went live this midnight this morning, last night. So the Open Data Portal is an online repository of downloadable criminal justice data in raw form and available to the public. We are starting this initiative by publishing 3 key data sets which tell part of the story, only part of the story, about the relationship between police and our communities. So the 3 data sets are deaths in custody, arrest rates, and law enforcement officers killed and assaulted. We believe, and in fact we know, this is the first kind of showing and transparency of this kind of information of any state in the country. The California Department of Justice, by the way, sits on a trove of data, a treasure trove of data. And so, again, the spirit behind this is we want to share this with the public in a way that can encourage better public policy around these issues. And so I will say that with all this very detailed data in the portal, I am issuing a challenge today to researchers, to civic coders, to journalists. Take a look at this information, analyze it, and give us your thoughts about what makes for better public policy. Give us your ideas. That's what is behind this. And the challenge is to you. And already we have called up and challenged, and they've accepted the challenge. University of California, Irvine, UCLA, UC Berkeley, Stanford, and my alma mater, USC. I got an honorary degree. The other point behind this is about the elimination of government bureaucracy. So, of course, when we started looking into this approach and what we needed to do, one of the things that, of course, we recognize is there are holes in our system. And in particular, two. One is that there's a real need to modernize the way that people report their data. And so we are holding ourselves accountable also to improving our internal systems around modernizing the way that folks need to report this information, in particular our law enforcement agencies, because they're basically holding it all together with limited resources. And we need to support their natural desire to upgrade their systems. So, for example, 40% of the records that are the basis of the data that we're sharing, we received in paper, written on a piece of paper. Technology allows us to do better. The second point is eliminating unnecessary reporting and redundancies. So we found with many of the systems that law enforcement agencies have to fill out multiple forms as it relates to the same incident. That's a lot of time that they're not investigating a crime or out on the streets patrolling or helping a person in need. We've got to do better, and we can do better. So part two of the initiative, that was the portal. Part two of the initiative is the Justice Dashboard. And essentially what it is an interactive tool, a web tool, that will spotlight trends and help law enforcement see how we're doing and improve our outcomes. So the initial findings you'll see in the report, and you can see the three icons there for the three data sets. So there's arrest rates on the left, death in custody in the middle, law enforcement officers killed or assaulted on the right. And so what we're doing then is in each of those areas of the dashboard, obviously breaking down that information in a way that you can look at it at a glance and get an idea of what the more detailed data provides and informs you of in the portal. So the initial findings, danger to law enforcement. Every day we have men and women who have taken an oath to protect our communities, our families, our society. And they put themselves in danger every day that they walk out of their home. So what the data shows us is that each year, and this is all California data, each year for every 10 officers on the beat, on the street working, there is one assault. For every 10 officers, there's one assault. There have been 280,000 assaults against law enforcement officers in California since 1980. That's, I'll do the math for you, 8,000 assaults a year. And 30% of those result in injury. Since 2011, when I became AG, I have attended the funeral services of 30 police officers killed in the line of, no, 33 police officers killed in the line of duty in California since 2011. And I would suggest what I think is obvious, that's 33 too many. We also have information about deaths in custody, and the data has shown us that in the last 10 years, there have been 6,837 deaths in custody in California. Over 80% of the deaths in custody occur in prison or jail. More than 60% of those deaths are of natural causes. Suicide accounts for roughly 10% of those deaths. Law enforcement agencies also report deaths in the process of arrest, which make up about 17% of all the deaths in custody. Approximately 70% of arrest-related deaths involve police officers. 78,000 police officers in this state conduct about 1.5 million arrests a year. Okay? So 78,000 police officers in California conduct about 1.5 million arrests each year. That's 10 to 15 arrest-related deaths per every 100,000 arrests. We are also, in the data, showing us clear racial disparities. African Americans account for 6% of California's population, but account for 17% of the arrests and 25% of the deaths in custody. Latinos comprise the largest number of arrest-related deaths. Of juvenile males, boys, arrested, African Americans are booked at a 20% higher rate than whites. In terms of where we're going, 2.0, if you will, our future dashboard metrics, we intend to release important information that, again, will help to hopefully work toward showing the full story. And let me just make offer you an example of what the full story will look like in my mind. The full story will include the victim stories. And it's going to include then the victim stories of how someone came to their aid. Someone arrested the person who molested or raped them or killed their child. The full story will include information about prosecutions and convictions. This does not purport to offer the full story. And I cannot emphasize that enough because, again, as a career prosecutor, I've seen a lot that tells me there are a lot more factors than what we're offering now that will contribute to the full story. So this is part of the story. So, because we need to look at the holistic, we have to look at this holistically is the obvious point I'm making. So think of this as chapter 1 in that story. And in conclusion, again, I will emphasize that open justice is just the start. And what we are going to do is continue to work in a collaborative way, which is what we have done to get where we are now, with law enforcement leaders like Charlie Beck and others. We are going to continue to work with our friends in the legislature. Karen Bass has been extraordinary. I'll also mention California Assemblyman Rodriguez, who is offering AB 71, which will require and mandate more reporting. It's a very important initiative, which I support. And what we're going to do is continue then to work as a system on improving the work that we know we want to do and can do, to improve relationships of trust and accountability by all, by community, by law enforcement, by government, by all of us as leaders. And so, you know, as I've said before many times, and I think we all know, with maybe a bit of bravado, but it's okay. So goes California, goes the nation. And I think California, with this initiative, is showing real leadership around what we can do to improve this conversation. And ultimately, the bottom line is the people have a right to know what's going on, and that ultimately is what's behind this initiative. So with that, I want to introduce the great Congresswoman, Karen Bass. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's bravado that's very well deserved. So let me begin by congratulating Attorney General Harris for once again demonstrating consistent leadership in what she has correctly labeled as smart on crime. This effort, Open Justice, uses smart justice technology so the public will have access to accurate information that is vitally needed, especially at this time. Recent events in California and across the country have called attention to the critical importance of the need to establish trust between law enforcement and the many communities that they are sworn to protect and serve. This initiative strikes the right balance by releasing data on deaths in custody, arrests, and bookings, along with data on assaults and deaths of law enforcement officers. Providing access to this type of data is an important first step that will allow communities in California access and respond to problems. Over the last year, facts and figures have been thrown around with little or no ability to verify the data. Accurate data will allow for distinctions to be made between tragic one-time incidents and disturbing citywide or statewide trends. As lawmakers, we can use this data to ensure that our conclusions are driven by facts and that our policies are accurately diagnosing issues in our community. With national attention focused on police-community relations, with national movements calling for dramatic changes in law enforcement, we need to make sure that changes in policy and practice are based on accurate information. With the leadership of Attorney General Harris, I'm proud to say smart justice is exactly what communities need, and I'm always proud to say that California will once again lead the way. Now I know that you will all be shocked, but actually in Congress we do work on legislation too. And we actually get some stuff done sometimes. So last year, we passed out of the House and was signed into law legislation by Representative Bobby Scott, the Death in Custody Reporting Act. This requires national data from police departments to document the number of people killed in police custody or during arrests. Under Attorney General Loretta Lynch, the U.S. Department of Justice is supporting community-oriented policing and an open, transparent process toward justice. Here in Los Angeles, Chief Beck and Sheriff McDonnell have repeatedly stressed the importance of public engagement and having law enforcement officers to serve not as warriors, but as guardians of our community. Having said all this, I must say that I'm deeply concerned with what the data does show. The disproportionality that the AG referred to is frightening. The data regarding community members' deaths in custody, arrest, and bookings. As the AG mentioned, African Americans are 6% of the population. I think it's important to reiterate this. Yet African Americans are 25% of the deaths in custody. I know that the majority of the deaths in custody are at natural causes, and I would suggest that maybe in open justice too, that we look a little deeper at that, because we also know statewide what the problems have been, especially in our state prison system, over the healthcare system. And as a former medical professional, I wonder what that means in terms of the natural causes, and to the extent that appropriate medical care was provided. The data also shows that there's large racial and ethnic disparities in arrest rates. African Americans are the most likely to be arrested at any age. The information is the first step toward developing a strategy to address the problems. And once again, I just want to thank the Attorney General, and I just can't thank her enough for her leadership over these many years. And I look forward to sharing what is happening in California with my colleagues in Congress, because I know that what begins in California can also be launched around the nation. Thank you very much.
And next I want to introduce Los Angeles Police Chief Charlie Beck.
Thank you. First, I want to recognize and applaud both our Attorney General and Congresswoman Bass for their leadership on these issues. Nothing is more important in policing than trust. Trust is the bottom line of law enforcement. There is nothing that outweighs it in the effectiveness of a law enforcement entity. Trust is based on data. The Los Angeles Police Department has been a data-driven police department for decades. We believe in using data to make decisions. Our biggest problem has been an absence of statewide data. It's very difficult for me to have context for what happens in Los Angeles when there is no comparative data statewide. Even better, I would like to have comparative data nationally. That's why it's so important that California leads here. So important, especially right now, while there are so many crises of trust throughout this nation regarding policing. The Los Angeles Police Department has focused on trust-based policing this year. We've opened dialogues. We've commenced training. And this is absolutely key to that. I applaud where this is going. I believe this will help inform the discussion. Many disparities exist in law enforcement. Many disparities exist that are racially based. Victimology occurs at disparate rates across racial boundaries. Arrests occur at disproportionate rates across racial boundaries. We can't answer these questions until we can be informed. And this is a huge part of that. So I applaud the Attorney General. I look forward to our continued work together. You know, out of crisis comes opportunity. You know, we have a national crisis in policing. It's also a huge opportunity to take a step forward and to build trust where sometimes, in some communities, it has been lost. Very important, and this is an important piece of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And next, it's my honor to introduce University of California, Berkeley, Professor Stephen Raphael. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's been an honor to work with Attorney General Harris's office on the Criminal Justice Open Data Initiative. For the past 3 months, my UC Berkeley colleague Justin McCrary and I have been working closely with DOJ staff analyzing several previously unreleased internal data files pertaining to very important questions that the criminal justice system faces. From a research perspective, this is just an amazing opportunity. Having access to the administrative and law enforcement records for a state of 40 million people, the amount that one could learn from what happens in our diverse society and what happens across our diverse cities is just incredible, and the potentials are sort of unlimited. While we've only been working together a relatively short time, we actually believe that this collaboration has already pointed to a number of very interesting questions and some policy issues for both data collection as well as law enforcement that we think should be pursued. Being a professor, I see PhD dissertations.
Great.
And just for example, being able to see the whole picture of the death in custody data and to be able to compare that to the volume of arrest that occurs gives you some sense of what the size is and what the scope is. And it is the case that the overwhelming majority of arrests do not result in a fatal incident. And in essence, that's good. However, when you look at those incidents, there are very troubling racial disparities. African Americans are 3.5 times more likely to die in the process of arrest relative to what one would expect, given their proportion in the resident population. However, if you compare that to the proportion of arrests, that disproportionality isn't so high. And so it already focuses attention on, well, why is there that racial disparity in arrests? And it's something that researchers and people can look for or could look at in greater detail. We've also identified some very interesting sort of lines of research whereby we can validate the data that has been reported and look for cases that have been missed and try to improve coverage in death and custody reporting, which is actually something that plagues both federal data and data in California, but California seems to be better than the feds on this take. And so in sum, this was really a fantastic experience. We, as Berkeley faculty and researchers, look forward to building a deeper relationship and hope that other members of the academic community will also take part in this initiative and lend your skills and your creativity to learning from the fantastic resources we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.